Hello and welcome to the Monument Cycling Podcast. I'm Owen Lake, I'm joined by Harry Johnson, and this is effectively a reboot of the old Monument Cycling Podcast that happened pre-COVID, way back. Harry's finally convinced me that this is something that we should reboot and get going again. Harry, how's it going?
Not too bad, thank you. Yeah, it's good to finally be chatting to you on camera. What are we going to be talking about on this podcast, Owen?
We're going to be talking about the British cycling scene. And that's where we are. That's our homes. We don't need another podcast about Tadej Pogačar demolishing everyone. What we need is some voices and some ideas focused on the British cycling scene. And hopefully that's what we're going to bring.
We need people asking the real questions, which is how many Mountbatten elite races would Tadej Pogačar win in a year? And the answer is, of course, 0.
I think we worked it out, didn't we, that on his 5-hour Zone 2 ride, he could just sit on the front and ride everyone off the wheel, just for Zone 2.
I don't want to think about what Pogačar would do to me in a race any longer, but we think there's a niche, and I don't think people are talking about the British scene in this kind of way. There's plenty of cycling podcasts out there, so it's going to be hard to drive out our little corner in it, but we'll try our best chatting about cycling. We both kind of know what we're talking about in some ways, and some ways not, but we'll throw our opinion in regardless.
That's what we need, more opinions.
Exactly, that's what the cycling world has been begging for. More white men to talk about their sport.
Bang on, man. So what have you got first for us? You've gone through, you've had a look at kind of current news, and you've brought up a few topics. What have you got going first?
So we do have a year review episode planned where we'll look through quite in depth in all the national series road races and criterions. But today I think we should just have a bit of a relaxed chat about British cycling as a whole, not just the organisation, but what the cycling racing scene is like in the UK, what recent developments there have been, and have a quick look into next year. But probably the most recent big bit of news was the unfortunate ending of Ryedale Grand Prix, with just a pretty small Facebook post from the organiser, and that's it. I'm not sure exactly how long the race has been going on, but it's at least been a few decades that there's been racing there. Had the national champs back in 2005 on the Abbey grounds that it's held on, but it's over, which I think kind of talks to the state of the BC scene at the moment, the races, whether there's people that want to do it and want to organise and want to race, but the kind of organisations around the races that aren't cycling organisations they just don't care, and I think that's one of the problems. But how did you react to that news coming out?
It was a bit of a gut punch, because I know the organiser. So this is Bob Howden, who is the president of British cycling. So this isn't just a small race. This is, in some ways, a bit of a flagship. You know, it's the pet project of the president of British cycling. So we spoke about the event in the lead up. We covered it for British cycling and for Monument Cycling, and then, just a few weeks later, boom, it's gone. And it wasn't. It's really weird because you don't get this catharsis. It's not like this lead up like you would get in a TV show or a film, and then like, oh no, it's all gone. It's just like, here we go. It's, it disappears in the span of a post on LinkedIn. I wasn't expecting it. Even with my previous conversations and working behind the scenes, I had no idea really that this was coming. I think it took me by surprise, it took you by surprise. I imagine it may well have even taken British cycling by surprise. It did not seem like this was a decision that was anything to do with cycling in the UK, which maybe points to a wider problem. I think we mentioned it earlier. How do you square the circle that is cycling versus the rest of everything going on in the UK?
Yeah, it's definitely a difficult one. I mean, my initial reaction it's probably quite sad that I reacted this way, but I think a lot of people would have done would just be like, okay, well, there's another one gone. Like it's definitely like it's surprising and it's sad, but it's not out of the blue. Like the trend in cycling racing in the UK over the last 10 years is for races to be cancelled, or races to be kind of teetering on the edge of not being viable, which obviously is not a good environment for anything to grow in or thrive. So it's just kind of the next hurdle to fall down. It's kind of like a sport is going to ebb and flow, but it's starting to feel like this flow is never ending. Like surely it's going to stop at some point and then start getting better, but we seem to just be falling further and further into a ravine. And with that impending doom,
that is what it feels like. You know, we since 2012, you know, and we had like the old Sky sponsorship of British cycling, HSBC, and there was like this golden age of cycling in the UK. We had like 6 UCI teams on the men's side with like 500,000 to £1 million budgets, and we almost didn't know what we had until it was gone. And now you're like, oh yeah, okay, we've got 2 UCI teams left on the men's side, and one of them doesn't really race in the UK and already put out the warning flares about will we have enough sponsorship next year. And then on the women's side, there are a lot more UCI teams, but they're not all like rolling in the cash. You know, they're UCI level, but I'm sure they could all do with an extra 10, 20, 30,000 pounds to try and balance their budget sheets, and the races are the same. Like how many races have we lost since those years? You know, I can think of a few already, but the national series has probably shrunk from like 15 races to 7. And it's like for people like you and me who raced on that scene, where do you go now? You know, what's your career path if you want to be a pro cyclist in the UK? Like, I don't. You're younger than me, so you must have thought about this more recently.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't get very far down or up the ladder of pro cycling, in that I didn't get on the ladder of pro cycling. But I think that's something I want to talk about with the difference of 2022 to 2023. No, sorry, 2023 to 2024, is that there has been some positive change in teams rising up that ladder. At least one team. We saw 2023 dominated by St. Piran. I'm still not exactly sure. Sorry, Ricky. Dominating in 2023, winning everything with different riders. It was always, I think there might have been one National Series road race where it wasn't top 3 St. Piran. And then 2024, they've kind of stepped up, focused. They said they were going to focus on the continental scene, and they have. And it's actually gone pretty well. I saw recently that Tyler Hannay won a stage in China, I think it was, on the continental circuit out there. And with them stepping up and focusing on the continental stuff, similar to sort of Trinity, but obviously not under 23. It's seen the breakout of some different riders, lots of different winners at the National Series this year. One of the most recent ones at Ryedale actually was Tom Williams on Scott Redding's team, which seemed kind of impossible a year ago.
Yeah, I feel like we've had a great rebalancing of the British scene, certainly on the men's side, where as you highlighted, St. Piran just demolished everything. It was ridiculous, and it felt like they had some riders that were too good for the level they were racing at. Guys like Zeb Kiffin, you know, who have now stepped up to be like pro team for the UCI. They're racing like big races abroad, and it's right. Sorry about that. The camera died, and we're back. So yeah, when St. Piran are demolishing everyone else, there's no like narrative. You know, from my perspective as a kind of a media entity, mogul, if you can call it that. A media mogul, basically, just like Richard Murdoch. Yeah, Rupert Murdoch. Who's Richard Murdoch? Yeah, St. Piran demolishing everyone else is a very hard sell after a while for people to get excited about it. Incredible for St. Piran, and you know, I hope it's stood them in good stead with like sponsorship negotiations, but less good for everyone else. So to see that playing field level this year was really nice. Like as you said, we've seen Tom Williams with Scott Redding's team stepping up, Ollie Reese winning. We've seen like British riders wanting to come back from Europe to race. Was it Ben Granger won the Lancaster Grand Prix? You know, he could be out racing in Italy, but actually he's come back and smashed the Lancaster Grand Prix for a bit with a really exciting victory. So it's, you know, we're certainly on the men's side, we've seen this rebalancing, and conversely on the women's side, we've seen some teams step up, you know, once again, and you start to look at them and go, maybe they need to start looking at graduating beyond the British scene. You know, so we had Alba Racing, we had Pro Noctis, who always been destroying everyone in the crits, and then this year really struggling against Alba Racing and Das Hutchinson Brother UK. Das feel like the one that if I had to like nominate a team to step up, I would. They feel incredible this year, and I think that's probably where they're aiming one day. And is that what the British scene has become? Sort of a thing that rather than being a destination, you just try to travel through it. Whether you're a team, whether you're a rider, even whether you're a race, do you just try to use it as a stepping stone and then build up to a higher UCI level?
Yeah, but on the other side of that kind of positive coin, we had the disappearance of Life Plus Wahoo after not being selected for the Tour de France, which I think came as a shock, definitely to the team, and I think to everyone that was kind of watching cycling and looking forward to the Tour de France Femme.
What do you think was the cause of that? Did they say it was? Because it was almost like it's closing, if like in a way with immediate effect. It wasn't with immediate effect. You know, they could kind of see out the year, but why? Is that just the power of the Tour de France and the Tour de France Femme? That if you're gunning for it and your sponsors want you to get in it and you don't get in it, you're dead?
I think part of the success of the Tour de France Femme is that it's such a huge event that if you're a team like Life Plus Wahoo, it's probably the main part of their sponsorship is saying, you know, we're a team, we're going to be on the biggest race, we're going to be at the biggest race in the world for a week and a day in the summer. So if you take that away, you're probably taking away a majority of their kind of like sponsorship power, which is unfortunate.
So a team kind of sponsors just for that.
Yeah, essentially.
That doesn't feel healthy.
No, but like it's better than it not being there at all. Like the Tour de France not being there at all. It takes time for it to grow, and like you want that one massive event, and then a few different events will pop up. A trend that I'm not really liking at the moment is there's recently just announced that Milan-San Remo are having a women's version next year in 2025 on the same day under the same name. But there was already a massive women's race going on at the same weekend that has kind of been pushed to the side. And it's like, do we really want to build women's cycling kind of under the name of men's cycling rather than building these races that have already been built and they already have a pedigree and a history, and kind of forget about them to give them a name that men's racing has built? Like it kind of almost seems dismissive of female cycling, women's cycling.
Yeah, you've got an opportunity to build something new and maybe even build it better. Like just because men's pro cycling is at a certain level, it doesn't mean that women's cycling can only reach that level. Like in theory, it could surpass it, because who's to say that the way pro cycling works right now is the best way? I think that's like exactly the same as you. It frustrates me because is Milan-San Remo the best race on that day? Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. Like there's already a standalone women's race, and we see that with like the women's Giro. I think is one that clashes around the Tour de France Femme, and and it starts to suck all the riders away from it. You know, they go, oh, actually, yeah, I'm gonna focus on this for the year instead, and that's a big issue we actually have on the British scene as well, where races will all clash with each other. And you know, we were talking recently, or I was talking recently with an organizer who was asking for some advice on when to aim for like a new crit, and I was like, whoa, don't go there, because you'll clash with the nationals, you'll clash with this, you'll clash with that. I think the National Circuit Series is like 7 or 8 races in 1 month, alongside some National Road Series races, which is a horrible schedule.
It blows my mind. I did it for the first time a couple of years ago, and I was like, why if you've only got 5 events in the year, why are 2 of them 3 days apart? Like, this doesn't do anything.
I treat, like, Otley and Ilkley are a great example. They go perfectly together, because they are like 5 miles away from each other, and you have them as like a double header. That's cool, and it makes this real buzz in the region. But there's no need to have, like, I think it's like Lancaster and another crit race are like right next to each other. They have been in the past, and I know the Lancaster organizer has always been trying to find the right slot in the calendar for them, because it's a brilliant event. But if you're in July, on the national calendar, you clash with so many other things, and then every other regional race, you know, wants to run in July, and then on the international calendar, you're clashing with the Tour de France. So how do you ever get media coverage of your own race?
How do we keep having races cancelled, and yet we still have the same scheduling issues every year? It seems to always be 2 races on at the same weekend at some point in the year. 2 big races. Obviously, you're always going to have different races on at the same time, but should British cycling take more of a role in fixing the British calendar? Well, I think it's only their responsibility ultimately. Like, yeah, it comes down to people. I think it's very easy for somebody on Facebook to say, this is the one thing we need to change, and next year everything's going to be fixed. If suddenly we halve the price of entries, the scene will be back. We'll have 20 Conti teams and everything will be brilliant again. But I think the last decade has shown us that it's an extremely complicated and nuanced issue that is going to take a lot of time to fix, and there isn't one. I mean, there isn't one problem and there isn't one fix.
Yeah.
And I mean, I have no idea what the fix is ultimately. Neither do you. I think if we knew, then somebody
Maybe.
higher up than us would know, or at least how we implement the fixes.
That's true. The other thing is we can all come up with ideas behind, like, the keyboard on Twitter and on Facebook and Instagram, wherever, social media, this podcast. But implementing those fixes is another matter. You know, so to bring a subject in that's really close to my home is obviously the Cambridge Criterium. We are at the whim of Cambridge. You know, when we choose a date there. We originally had a May date.
Of course, you are the organizer, manager, emperor of Cambridge Criterium.
Ruling over my own kingdom.
We'll get into extremely in-depth another episode, but that was a massive positive from this year. So.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, thank you. From my perspective, it was brilliant, but as I said, we all the way up until about February, it was going to be a May event, and then the city was like, "Hey, can you do this in August?" Just like, we've been looking at the dates, and can you do it in August? And we're like, yeah, okay, because we don't really we have some say in it, obviously, but like it's a city. They have a lot more to deal with than just like. Than just one bike race. So, we saw it with the Ride London race. The UCI said, okay, you can't run on this weekend, but we'll give you the next weekend. And Ride London's like, what do you mean? Like, we can't just tell London we're going to run it on a different day. Like London has this date free, and that's it. So there's a lot of like wonderful things we'd love to do to fix the calendar, and like we can suggest, and we go like, oh, would it be great if like Cambridge was here and Lancaster was there, Otley was here, and but the reality is it's almost impossible to do that, because those events have found a time in the calendar, and like the rest of the calendar is full of half marathons, it's full of city festivals and things like that. And then, you know, we've got riders like yourselves to build your calendars around it as well. So there's no quick fix, and any fix is going to have to include the race organisers at like a real top level of saying, okay, when if we want to change a date, or if we want to look at changing a race location or something, can you do here? You know, the race organisers are going to be the ones that can or can't do that, which is, yeah, there's no easy fix on that, unfortunately.
Trying to scramble away from the doom and gloom of the British scene, we'll talk about Kat Ferguson for a little bit. An incredible rider. We saw her, obviously she's been kind of flying up the ranks the last few years through under-16s and through juniors. I think she is still a junior at the moment, second-year junior.
Yeah.
Just moved to Movistar. We saw her at the start of the year before she moved to Movistar, but after she got the contract, she moved at the middle of the year, which is pretty normal when you're that young moving to a team. So she moved in August, I think. We saw her ripping up the first National Series round at East Cleveland, sprinting away from, I think she won in front of her teammate actually, and she won that race on a spare bike after she crashed with 2 laps to go. So got back up, got a spare bike, got back to the front group, and then sprinted for the win, which kind of made everyone go, okay, she's pretty good, which Movistar agreed with. So this 18-year-old joined World Tour team, does a few races in the first few months of her career as a pro. You know, you kind of want to get thrown in, you know, sit at the front, do a bit of work for your teammates, don't make any enemies, learn a few lessons. But she's gone in and won 2 professional races in her first few weeks at Movistar, which is bonkers.
I don't know if we've ever seen a rider as exciting as her across the sport, like in terms of men's racing or women's racing. She is so exciting to watch. She has such a wise head on her shoulders when it comes to racing, but also when it comes to like outside of the race day. I remember doing a Instagram poll a while back about Tom Pidcock. Like, will Tom Pidcock win the World Championships one day? The men's road World Championships. And I just thought that's obsolete with Kat Ferguson. She like, if I were a gambling man, I would put money on it now. Like, that's how I feel about her. I really do think she will be like one of the greatest female riders of all time. Like, that's I'm quite bullish on that. The question is, will she really be one of the best riders ever? And how soon will we start to see that?
Yeah, I mean, obviously there's lots of different hurdles that she's got to get across to kind of step up to that. We've seen riders that have hit it pretty hard at 18, 19, 20 and then kind of burnt out a little bit. But the fact she's already a World Tour team, a good setup with professional older riders that she's already been racing with, should be pretty good. But I've got her results page up. So her first race on the 8th of September at a 1.1, she got second in France, her first pro race. Backed up with a 7th in a 1 pro.
What?
Then won the first stage of a tour, a 2.2 tour in Belgium. Then won the World Championships as a junior in the TT. Won the World Championships in the road race. Came back to Belgium with Movistar and then won a 1.1.
Oh, she's won again.
On the yesterday, she won
Can you
yesterday.
imagine being like a seasoned pro,
Like what?
coming up against the 18-year-old who's meant to be, you know, traditionally it's like, oh, inexperienced, they need to learn the ropes. No, She's got like that winning instinct. I mean, she's already got a better career than some people.
Yeah,
She could
I mean,
retire
there are
tomorrow.
riders who
She's
just
pretty
don't.
happy with
There are
that.
riders that are happy with the top 10, and that's their career.
Yeah, but she's being brought on to win. Clearly, like you wouldn't sign a rider like early for 3 or 4 years, which is what Movistar have done, and then put her into positions. Not only is she in those races and winning them, she has to be given the free rein to win them. So she's being put in there as a leader or like a co-leader to have those opportunities. That's a lot of pressure for a young person, you know. Will she? I mean, she's already proven that she can do it in the Junior World Championships. So one would hope, one would assume, that pressure is not going to be a problem when she continues to step up and goes into these elite races. And maybe, you know, will we see her riding in the elite World Championships next year for like as British cycling's leader?
Yeah.
That's not to take away from the women that are already racing there, but she's got another year to improve, you know. And what's her trajectory going to be like? Is it this kind of exponential curve, or is it going to plateau off? And that's what I find so exciting. Like, she has already achieved so much, and she has the potential to achieve so much more, but the hurdle is that you know, you would expect this to tail off and taper off, but it's at what point does she tail off? And I'm hoping that point is after she's world champion and after she's become one of the greatest riders of all time.
Yeah, I think she's going to be a hot take. I think she's going to be a pretty good professional cyclist, and she's come straight from Shibden Hope race team.
That team,
or whatever they were called the last 2 years. I think
that team.
It was announced last year that World Tour teams, when they sign a rider, as part of that signing, they have to give money to all the teams and clubs that have kind of like signed that. That was definitely the case for the men's peloton. I assume it would be the same for the women's.
I hope it's true for the women's.
So these teams and these clubs that are producing these riders are hopefully going to get a cash boost from that as well. So even more support for the.
I'm telling you, Shibden is like the sleeper team. You know, when you go like, oh, what's the best development team? You might think, I want to go to Jumbo-Visma's dev team. Like, no, if you're a woman, go to Shibden Apex Racing team. Like, it is ridiculous. They've Kat Ferguson, her teammate Imogen Wolf, is probably like a top 5 in the world junior right now as well.
Sure.
And she's going to Jumbo-Visma next year with the pro contract. There are other riders in that team coming through, and they demolish the cross scene and the road scene. It's weird to see what you would think of as like a club low level like junior team churning out some of the best riders in the world, but also really positive because those riders are British. So like something must be going right on the British scene in that case. And
yeah, they were racing in Britain. It's not as if it's just churning them out. As soon as they get a little bit good, they can race in Europe for a bit. They were tearing it up in the UK. I was commentating on East Cleveland, and both me and Henry were just impressed with how mature they rode. If you watch them race, they didn't race like you'd think a 17 and 18-year-old are going to race. They raced like a proper team, and it paid off. They did very well, and have done very well, obviously, from that. But yeah, just a good setup. And obviously the men's side as well have been doing well in the cross season. With as we move into cross actually as well. We haven't mentioned that at all.
Nicely moving into the cross.
Yeah, the cross scene in the UK is. It's not something I follow massively, to be honest. I kind of see it from the outside. But how is that going over the last year or so and going into it this year?
Honestly, it's like. It seems like, from my perspective, Team Spectra Racing are on the up. Like, if I had to like call out one team that's going to do really well, and it always becomes like a battle between them and Hope. And Thomas Mean, who is like the a few years ago we had Ian Field. Do you remember Ian Field?
Yeah, he's
Ian
got
Fields?
the FKT on the South Downs way.
He's yeah, exactly. I mean, he is a beast of a rider, and he is also like his British racing Palmares was incredible, but he never quite replicated that on the European scene, because obviously once you go to the big World Cup races, you're up against a much higher quality. Thomas Mean is an incredible rider who does back that up on the on the European scene as well. So it always becomes a battle of like Thomas Mean versus everyone else, and the question is, can they beat him? Now, he used to be like racing on the road scene and on the crit scene as well, like back in the With Sun God days, and he was an absolute beast there. I really like him. I really like the Team Spectra Racing guys. It makes for some really good racing, and there's the Ribble Verge Sport as well, who have some like absolutely out there kit designs. I've probably forgotten a few people. Joe Blackmore probably won't be there anymore because he won the Tour de l'Avenir.
Well, yeah, he's done a bit. He's done a bit more than that as well. And another, although that's like a different kind of British success, where he hasn't really done much in the UK. I know he's done a few like gravel races and cross races, obviously.
Like mountain biking,
he came from mountain biking,
like that, but
if you don't really follow too in depth, he seems like he's just kind of popped up suddenly. But he's done a lot of racing in Europe. Kind of the
racing abroad,
like the Hugh Carthy, Simon Carr route, where they're not massive names, and then if you're just like a casual fan, you'll see them at the Vuelta, and suddenly they're ripping it up.
Yeah,
and you're like, where's this guy come from? But yeah, the UK is still churning out talent. Like that's why I think so many people are hopeful. Is that the riders are still coming through. Like people are still riding bikes, people are still racing.
They're good. Like the level of racing here is insane. For the amount of investment that's in the area and in the sport, which is pretty low, really. The quality of rider that's coming out of it is crazy. I mean, like we literally have like Dan Bigham as a great example of the the sort of mentality on the British scene. Because he's bringing that time trial, like aero fanatic ideas across to the point where he's training himself to be one of the best riders in the world. Or him and folks like Jacob Tipper, who are were on the same team as him. They know how to create the best riders in the world, and then when they get to the like Ineos, they can prove it. But right now, there's no way to prove it on the domestic scene in the UK because there's not the investment, there's not as much media around it. So you can have riders like Joe Blackmore, who you just have no idea about, and then all of a sudden it's like he's won the biggest race in the world from the 23s, and everyone's like, who? So it's a bit of a weird flux state, and kind of bringing it back to what you said at the beginning, what we were saying at the beginning, which is that there was this golden age where everything was on ITV4, everything was like loads of press about it, the magazines were writing about it, you'd see it. British cycling had all the resources in the world to plough into boosting it, and you'd see who these big riders were coming through. And now you've just got riders that can slip through the gaps and then pop up, and it's like, oh, they're riding the Tour de France next year, but who are they? Because I've never heard of them before. And I think what that's doing is also giving rise to what we've seen you do, which is alternative racing. Like the gravel scene in the UK is growing. Like you've raced. I'd rather let you say what you've raced this year in terms of gravel rather than me get it wrong.
I haven't done any gravel. Just kind of.
Like ultra gravel sort of stuff, like Badlands.
Lachlan Morton's probably, he holds a lot of that on his shoulders of being, what's the word I'm looking for? Trailblazer. In that way, but there's a lot of riders in the UK that are kind of realising that they're like, a team doesn't really give me anything. Like I'm going to be left on my own anyway. I may as well just race, do what I want, get my own sponsors, and the fact that a lot of people are making that successful speaks to again, like there's riders in the UK. There is money in the UK for the sport. It's just about putting it in the right place, and that
how you access it.
The forces that we're pushing against isn't really cycling. It's, again, like not being able to put on Ride London. It's not being able to find places for the women's tour. Not being able to find places to run the Tour of Britain and make that a little bit more exciting and stuff like that. It's like, well, I've had local races that have been cancelled because the host venue just isn't fussed about the race, and they're like, okay, well, it's not. It doesn't really affect us whether or not you race it, so we'll just double the price, and if you can't do it, do one.
That's so true, and that actually is one of the things that we came up with Cambridge, you know, and Cambridge, the city, didn't really care about the event, you know, so they obviously cared about it, but they could take it or leave it. Certainly when it was in the concept and the vision stage, it's like we've got enough going on in the city that we don't need an extra event, we don't need a bike race. And we've really had to push to kind of show our vision and show what we hope it can become. And I imagine that's the same all across the country, like with council budgets being squeezed. You're not going to get places necessarily bidding large chunks of money for the Tour of Britain. And was it 2 years ago, the last year that Sweet Spot ran the Tour of Britain, you had what was like a relatively uninspiring route, you know, but that wasn't really, that wasn't Sweet Spot's fault. That was the fault of like the general economy in the UK, that nobody wanted to pay to put on a bike race. So the only places that wanted to pay to put on a bike race ended up being an uninspiring route. And there's not much we can do to change that from the from where we're standing, you know. I think if cycling is to kind of get through this patch, it has to learn how to survive through this patch and learn how to work with the current economic situation rather than just pretending everything's the same and just like why can't we run a race in Ryedale? Why can't we run a race in London or something?
Easier said than done. If you could pick anywhere in the country to run a Tour of Britain stage, where do you run it?
Okay.
If the NIMBY anti-cyclist British public didn't exist, and there was money growing on trees.
Ooh. I think there are two things that I would want to see. Either a insane windy flat stage through either the Lincolnshire or the Cambridgeshire fens, like I do not see enough of, and I absolutely love a windy stage where everyone's in the gutter and it feels like anyone's race could end at that moment.
God,
like,
you're psychotic.
Like, oh, we've got Remco Evenepoel, but he's missed the split and, you know, he's screwed. Like, I love that because I love the one-day races of the early season classics. So in some sort of Fenland flat area would be brilliant. Or I want to see a stage like the 2014 Tour de France that I think ended in Sheffield with Vincenzo Nibali like soloing to victory in the yellow jersey over this like Ardennes classic, finishing in Sheffield like an epic historic city. I think that the thread that joins both of those is I don't care about the wider Tour of Britain. I'm like, build me a one-day classic that reminds me of the classics in Northern Europe. What about you? What would you want to see?
I stick them up some mountains in Wales. I love riding in Snowdonia, or the new name, which I can't remember, of Snowdonia. But there are so many stupid steep climbs over there that are just begging for a race, like 25% for a few kilometres. There's no mountains. There are no like high mountains. You're not going to get 20-minute time gaps or anything. So I think the roads, like you said, talking about the one-day classics, I think the roads in the UK, like you go down some country lanes and you're like, this would make an incredible one-day like World Tour classic. Like surely this can rival at least the course of like Paris-Roubaix, Flanders. Like we've got the roads, we've got the little lanes, we've got the cobbles, but there's just not that history of that is it's just not normal at the moment. So you'd have to push against something completely new, which, as it's proven in the UK, is basically impossible. But like we've got it. We've got the roads. We've got the lanes. We ride down them every day. We're like, this is incredible. Yeah.
But do you think that, you know, I mentioned the fact that you have to pay, you know, that cities have to pay to host a stage, start or finish. Do you think that you could still find those roads, you know, relying on, okay, we've got to finish at this place and we've got to start in this place, and maybe we've got to go through this place? Is that what causes the issue? Or is it the fact that, I'm going to try and choose my words very carefully here. Is it that the people who are organising it maybe don't have that as their primary goal? That I'm not trying to say that's necessarily a bad thing. They have a lot of things that they have to think about when they're planning the Tour of Britain. And do you think that that could be one of the reasons we don't see races like that?
I think there's probably an overall lack of, not from the organisers, but from sponsors, just a lack of willingness to put in money. Just like it's just not a strong event at the moment. So I think you're kind of backed into a corner of, okay, well, the only way we can make this financially viable is to go to the places that are paying the most. Obviously, this is complete speculation. Neither of us actually know the ins and outs of the Tour of Britain.
That's true.
Maybe in the future we'll talk to somebody that actually organises the Tour of Britain, and we can discuss it. Because obviously nobody's doing it by choice. They're not like, okay, we're going to go to... What is the race that goes up that climb that kind of sweeps back on the coast and then goes up super steep? Is it East Clevedon?
That's East Cleveland Classic.
I swear to God, if I see another race on that course, up that climb,
that must be it.
I think they're the only place that are willing to pay for it.
Yeah, and to be fair to them, they've created an incredible race. But when you watch it for like the third time, you're like, okay, well, we know like Cat Ferguson's going to smash it up there, or you know, I wonder, because we spoke about this before, the Tour of Britain, and it is a huge cost to British cycling, or to whoever's running it, you know, Sweet Spot until recently. And upon like taking that upon themselves, British cycling opened themselves up to like a potentially 6 or 7 figure liability that they are like, you know, they don't really have that money to lose. So Lloyd's Bank comes in and sponsors it, and we're like, phew, the Tour of Britain is saved in that respect. But that's kind of like a moonshot. How often do you get a sponsor that's going to lump you like 1 or 2 million quid? It just doesn't, like in the UK, that doesn't happen a lot. So I guess they either need to find a way to get better sponsors, or bigger, not better, Lloyd's is like more of the big sponsors. Sorry, Lloyd's, I didn't. Yeah, more of big sponsors like Lloyd's, or find other places that are willing to pay to put it on. And I don't know how you do either of those things.
Like, yeah, I think I've said it a few times now. Like, it's easy to be like, that's the problem, fix it. It's like, people know what the problem is. It's not like we're talking about anything super complicated here. Just obviously doing it is very difficult and impossible, basically. If you could name any sponsor that you'd want to see sponsoring the British pro cycling scene, who would it be? I think the sponsor that pops to mind, I think, for anything is Red Bull. And they've just got kind of infinite money to throw at anything. And they just seem cool. Yeah. I'd rather... Something I would, though, I'd rather take absolutely no money and watch the scene crash and burn than take Shell money.
Yeah,
like,
you told me
direct.
That if I remember this, that if I took Shell as a sponsor for Monument Cycling, you'd leave.
Like the only reason they're probably putting in pennies compared to what they could be putting in, obviously, if they wanted to see the actual.
Yeah, they probably make that in a day. Well, they give British Cycling, they probably make that as profit in a day, and probably. It was reportedly £1.5 million,
which is nothing like that.
Nothing
that is, for British cycling.
Yeah, it was such a I'm torn. I really do understand why you have to do that. You know, I do understand, but at the same time, I don't understand.
I think it's done more damage for the image of cycling in the UK than that money was worth.
Do you think that damage was just to British cycling among the members, or do you think that like the wider reputation as well?
I think the wider reputation. I just think it just looks embarrassing. Like it's
especially now with you know, we've got Just Stop Oil, we had Extinction Rebellion, Insulate Britain. You know, there's a lot of like really climate focused pressure groups right now, and who kind of have, you know, valid points, and it puts you in the firing line for them. But it also it kind of takes you off of the radar of more conscientious potential partners. You know, if you want to approach a B Corp who's, let's say, Patagonia, you know, who have literally set up a trust to go back into helping the environment, Patagonia are probably going to look at you and say, oh, yeah, not while you've got Shell, thanks. And there are some sponsors that obviously won't care, some sponsors that it won't touch on, but I can really see certain sponsors looking at a big Shell logo on GB kit and rightly or wrongly just being like, I'm not going to touch that right now, and that's a real shame. And we'll never know whether that's cost them money or gained them money, you know, whether it's the right decision. But you are a member, I'm a member, and we're probably, I'm sure there must have been people that cancelled their membership over that.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I don't know directly, but I know people cancelled it.
Yeah,
it's just embarrassing. I think
is that an issue of where you're British cycling and you have to wear so many hats? You know, one is the Tour of Britain, the Women's Tour of Britain, all of the national series events, the national championships, and grassroots, and being a member organisation, and being a pressure group to try and, you know, further cycling in the UK. Is that too many hats for one organisation?
This is I wanted to bring this up actually as we start to close out. We'll go for a few hot takes. My hot take is that I think there should be a British cycling that focuses on getting people cycling in the UK, and the work they do to get people cycling is good. I think it should happen. I think there definitely should be a space for that, and that's what British cycling should be. And then I think there should be a separate sister organisation, you know, you can overlap it, whatever, that is British Cycling Racing, that focuses on racing in the UK from the ground up, from little local races, but it's just racing. I think they have similar things set up in Belgium and France, where they've got like a Cycling Vlaanderen or Sport Vlaanderen or whatever it is.
Yes.
Where it is just their race organisation. And you've got somebody at the top of that running everything, and their only job is racing. Whereas it feels like at the moment there's lots of people in British cycling that it's like, okay, well we'll throw a bit of money there, we'll do a little bit there, just to keep it happy, just to keep it ticking over. But there's nobody that's actually focused on making it happen.
Yeah, I'm going to go with an even hotter take, which is, I agree, but I would get rid of the top level entirely. I just wouldn't even worry about it right now. It is something that, yes, you should focus on at some point, but right now, have your British cycling kind of community focus, and then have your British cycling that focuses on just grassroots racing, because the Tour of Britain is brilliant, but you need somebody to look at the grassroots and say, how do we continue that, and how do we grow that, and then down the line you'll have a stronger top level because of it. So I would just go even further and be like, slash and burn, baby. Let's just get rid of this.
I think I mentioned this before we were recording, but yeah, I'd rather have no Tour of Britain than the Tour of Britain we've had the last couple of years. Maybe not last year, but this year, I'd rather wait a few years for it to be done properly and create a race that, you know, lots of big riders turn up to, and is kind of fair for what the UK deserves. rather than just kind of
Yeah.
ticking over with something that's a bit crap. Which is what we got.
To be fair, I think they did an incredible job this year. But I did secretly hope that they would take over the event from Sweet Spot and then just leave it for a year and just talk to partner cities and towns and host areas and come back in 2025, just because sometimes taking that breather can allow you to have an opportunity to come back stronger, but B, to come back knowing, hey, this is exactly what we want to do, not just the same way it's always been done for the sake of it.
Exactly. Because I look at, we were talking about where we'd want to see the Tour of Britain if there were money growing on trees and nobody living anywhere. I see pictures of the milk race back in the day of these massive pelotons with the biggest names in the world smashing up these climbs in Wales and the Peak District. I'm like, it's there. Yeah. It's here already. We've got the history. There are the riders that want to do it. It's just kind of connecting those dots, which is obviously a lot harder than connecting dots. If it was just connecting dots, then it would have been done already. But
I wish. Which I guess nicely leaves us kind of teeing up something for next week. Next week we've got, in fact, at the end of this week, we've got the first National Trophy Series. So I'll want to be talking about that next time. How it goes. It's in Derby, which is always one of the best circuits, and what it's going to tell us about the scene through winter, but also the scene coming out of that. What are the teams doing? What are the riders doing? And I'll try and get some of the juicy inside gossip from them.
Can't wait. So we'll do a bit more of an in-depth review of this season as well next week. But if you've enjoyed this episode, good news, it's only going to get better than these random ramblings of two kind of uneducated cycling fans.
Yeah, pretty uneducated, let's be honest.
It's definitely a starting point. But thank you for listening. We'll see you next week.
Bye.